Greetings, everybody. Welcome to my live cast, 11 a.m. Tuesday mornings. I'm Ezra Helps, cannabis consultant. Today, we're going to talk about International Ninja Day. It is Day of the Ninja, and I thought it was a really great metaphor for the cannabinoid molecule, the molecules that come from the cannabis plant and that already exist in our bodies and how they work in our bodies. They're kind of like these little ninjas that go around fighting for good, mostly. So we'll go into that. Join me after the live cast today. I'm going to do a brief, start a discussion live in my Ezra Helps Facebook group. So if you want to ask more questions after that, you can. And let's get started. So I'm going to talk about the history of cannabinoids on the planet. Cannabinoids are the molecules that are found in the cannabis plant, and they're found naturally in our bodies and in the bodies of every creature except for insects on the planet. It's pretty fascinating. So I'm going to talk about the history. I'm going to talk about what we know about the cannabinoid system in our bodies, and then what some of the major cannabinoids do in our systems, and then how you can deliver them to your body. So about 600 million years ago, there were no humans on the planet, there were no flowers, there were no major organisms, except for many sea-dwelling organisms, one of them being the sea squirt. And the sea squirt had a genetic mutation that created the endo, meaning inside, cannabinoid system in its bodies. And this genetic mutation led to eventually everything coming after it that was part of its family tree having an endocannabinoid system. This is a natural feedback system in the body, and it is involved in regulating the behavior of cells. So little neurotransmitters are sent out, these little ninjas in the form of cannabinoids, and they help cells go back to normal, go back to homeostasis once they've created a behavior or once they have initiated an action like inflammation, which is positive, but only short term in the body. And then endocannabinoids go in, bring the inflammation down. So this is 600 million years ago. This is a very long time ago. 35 million years ago is when the cannabis plant came along. So it is the cannabis plant, even though it's famous and is the namesake for cannabinoids, is much younger as a species than our actual system in our bodies that receives cannabinoids. So that's an interesting fact. But the story and the theory, one of the theories behind how cannabinoids were formed in the cannabis plant is really amazing, and it is a great metaphor when we're talking about ninjas. And that is about 35 million years ago, the Himalayas were being formed, as they still are today. The mountains were going up, and cannabis was growing at the foothills of the Himalayas. And each year, the cannabis plants kept getting closer and closer to the sun, essentially. And this sun was stressing the plant. So the plant mutated and developed cannabinoids, these resinous molecules to protect the plant, which is what it does. So cannabinoids in the plant work as little ninjas, helping the surface of the plant remain free of stress from the sun and from light, from UV rays. They also help with pathogens, microbes, bacteria, and bugs, insects. Even insects will get stuck in the resin on a cannabis plant and prevent bugs from attacking the plant. So this was a stress mechanism that was created by the plant and is coincidentally the same chemicals that when you deliver them to an organism with a spine, everything except for the insect world, we receive them, and they go into our natural receptor sites in our cells. So think about that for a second. We have a system in our bodies that is 600 million years old. We have a plant that delivers these same chemicals, 35 million years old. And get this, medical schools in North America, there's about 160 of them. 13% of those medical schools study the endocannabinoid system. 13% of those schools even mention it in their coursework. This is a great metaphor for ninjas, because ninjas are hidden, right? They go out at night and nobody knows where they are, and they're doing their work in the shadows. Well, the endocannabinoid system was discovered in the 1990s, so quite recently in terms of understanding physiology in humans and in animals. But we're not studying it. We're not learning how important this feedback system is. Luckily, scientists do study it. So in medical schools, they're doing their own thing. They might be avoiding things with the word cannabis or canna in them, like the endocannabinoid system. Sounds like we're studying pot or marijuana. So maybe they're avoiding that. Not sure why they're not studying it. But the scientists of the world are researching it, because hundreds and thousands of papers are being written and researched every day that are dealing with this feedback system in the body. There's all these amazing studies that can take place, because remember, you can study this system in the body without the plant at all. You do not need the plant. You can actually create synthetic agonists and antagonists. These are things that they're like switches, right? They turn things either on or off. So you can turn the endocannabinoid system on or off in your own body, or in an animal's body, a mouse model, when you're doing an experiment on a mice, for example. And you can measure what happens when the endocannabinoid system is either turned off or is activated. So this is why there's so much scientific research on the endocannabinoid system. But because of this fear around cannabis and confusion around what it does on the body, the FDA has not approved it. In the United States, it's still a Schedule I drug, meaning it has no medicinal benefits whatsoever. So, you know, when you're in the industry, in the cannabis industry, and you read hundreds of studies about the endocannabinoid system, and scientists all over the world are perfectly comfortable sharing this information about how amazing it is, it's quite strange that in America we have access, and over half the states in the country have legalized medical marijuana, but there's this missed opportunity. There's a gap in the knowledge. That's what I do, is I try to fill that gap. I try to expose these ninjas, because ninjas are really cool. And we want ninjas, especially if they're good ninjas, working to perform good deeds in our bodies. So what do they do? What do these endocannabinoids do, and cannabinoids in general, whether they're being delivered from the plant or whether they're working inside of us? So primarily, their function is to regulate. So I've used the metaphor before of cannabinoids being like first responders or social workers. So if we're thinking about a ninja, you know, these ninjas are going in to the body and looking for cells that are out of balance. They're like superheroes looking for crime, looking for issues where there's something negative or something wrong with the system, and they're seeking to correct it. That's just their function. That's the function of an endocannabinoid system, right? The cannabinoid that is naturally produced in our bodies. We have two main ones. We have anandamide. Anandamide is mimicked by THC. So this is a natural chemical we all produce, and it's created when we exercise. And people speculate that the runner's high is anandamide flooding the system, just like THC would, and making us feel good, releasing endorphins, and bringing down inflammation, which we need to do after exercising. So anandamide is an endocannabinoid system, endocannabinoid rather. And then the second one, 2AG, is mimicked by CBD. CBD famously now is coming from hemp, from the hemp industry. You can get it on my website. It's purchased anywhere and everywhere. And 2-AG is a much more subtle compound. It is toning the system. It seeks to get our own endocannabinoid system online. It's like a trainer for the endocannabinoid system, whereas anandamide is actually having a very specific behavior. But here's what's incredible about the endocannabinoids and also cannabinoids is that they are, for example, in the human body, anandamide is the most concentrated in the uterus. So this is a THC-like chemical that is concentrated in the uterus because of, one, pain. So when women are menstruating and they have a period cramp, anandamide is helping to reduce the inflammation and pain that's occurring there, but it's also essential for cell proliferation at childbirth. So at conception, rather. So when the fetus is conceived, you have a massive increase of cells, and the endocannabinoid system is very present in this era of the human body to help cells build and grow. But because it's a regulator, it's always seeking to build cells when it's appropriate, when we're supposed to be having an increase of cells, as well as on the opposite end of that, to decrease cell activity and proliferation when there's a problem. And this is where you get the claims of cannabis curing cancer or fighting cancer or helping with cancer. I think it's, so just briefly on the curing cancer aspect, that's like saying chemotherapy cures cancer or radiation cures cancer. We don't say that. We say that people use that for treatment. It can help with many people, and there are certain cancers where conventional treatments really do help. Cannabinoids are the same way. They're not going to cure cancer. They have been shown to slow down, to reverse cancer. They go into the cells that are proliferating out of control, and they latch onto the cell and turn that cell off. They say, sorry, here's our ninja moment. You guys are little criminals in the body, cancerous criminals, and we're going to flip a switch in your cell and force you to perform apoptosis, programmed cell death. It's like they're performing harikari at the request of these endocannabinoid ninjas. It's pretty cool. So when we're talking about cannabinoids that are coming from outside of the body, phytocannabinoids coming from the plant, and this is a unique plant. This is the only species on the planet that produces cannabinoids at the level that it does. There are a couple other plants that have some cannabinoids in them. Echinacea is one of them. But the cannabis plant is just a pharmacopoeia of cannabinoids. It has over 400 chemical compounds in the plant. And right now we're finding that it's around 100, 80 to 100 are active chemical compounds in the plant. This is what makes it really hard to just make a very simple drug out of the plant, because all the cannabinoids are having different interactions in the body and different interactions with each other. They're really fascinating that way. It's like little different tribes or sects or dojos of ninjas all doing different things, right? So now let me talk about what the different phytocannabinoids are and what they do in the body. THC, most common one. It's psychoactive. It releases endorphins. It causes euphoria in the body. It is also an analgesic, so it reduces or regulates the firing of pain nerves. If you have an active nervous system firing out the pain message over and over again, THC as well as CBD, the next one I'm going to talk about, have been shown to bring that pain down. That's really important, especially for the opioid crisis right now. There's some debate about whether we should be legalizing another drug when there's this huge drug problem with opioids. Well, when opioid users, when people who use painkillers that are opioids, when they have access to cannabis, when it's in their community, legal dispensaries, and it's part of their pain regimen, they use fewer opioids. There are fewer opioid overdose deaths reported in ERs. So I know that the debate is not fully settled on what marijuana addiction is going to do, but when we're talking about fatalities, when we're talking about people literally dying from opioids, a legal prescription drug that's supposed to bring down pain, when we have another non-toxic plant-based medicine that can reduce opioids and reduce pain, to me it's a no-brainer. This is something that should be present and available to anyone who suffers chronic pain or anyone who is in danger of having an opioid overdose. So next cannabinoid ninja is CBD. CBD is a anxiolytic. It brings anxiety down. It is also an analgesic. It can reduce pain, and it's a muscle relaxant, all without being psychoactive. So it does not have a strong effect on the body. It doesn't alter our consciousness the way THC does. It's like a passive ninja. This is a gentle, non-violent ninja in the system. And it's important to note too, as I mentioned in my live cast about the comparison between tobacco and tobacco smoke and cannabinoid smoke or cannabis smoke, that there are some evil ninjas. Nicotine is a chemical compound that comes from the plant, the tobacco plant, that when it goes into our bodies, it actually keeps cancerous cells alive. It helps them to be like zombies, wandering through our system with no purpose, becoming cancerous and tumor-like. So that is the exact opposite from what cannabinoids do. I think this is a very important distinction that I will have said before and will say many times. Cannabis smoke and tobacco smoke have opposite effects in the body. That's really important as well. Now we're going to go into a little bit more complex. This is a sort of geeky part of cannabis, just because these cannabinoids aren't as common, but the research on them is really fascinating because they're doing these studies on these different cannabinoids. And these are the top ones, CBG and CBN, cannabigerol and cannabinol, are two cannabinoids that are less psychoactive. They're not as profound in their effect on psychoactivity as THC, but they're sedative, they're sleep-inducing. So they can deliver these cannabinoids to a mouse experiment, a mouse model, and show that the mice are sedated by them. They are also really fascinating ninja cannabinoids because they've been shown to fight, CBN has been shown to fight the MRSA virus. This is a really strong, hard to kill virus that humans can get. And they're working on antibiotic drugs that fight this. And CBN has been demonstrated to fight this virus, to kill it off for some reason. That's an awesome ninja right there. And CBG, cannabigerol, is also antiviral, antimicrobial rather. So there are some benefits to these cannabinoid ninjas entering the system and helping to fight off other evil ninjas. Let me just take a quick break, check my feed here to see if anyone has asked a question, to see if anyone is watching at all. No problem if you're not. So it looks like we are good. Let me just move on to the next cannabinoid ninja, and that is the raw cannabinoids. So THC and CBD have precursor molecules. These are the molecules as they exist before before they become heated. And CBDA and THCA are really fascinating molecules because one, THCA, so this is basically the raw cannabis plant. If you ingest that, it has way less psychoactivity. The THC has not been activated by heat, and so THCA enters your body and has been shown to have inflammatory benefits without the high. So if somebody has hives, has inflammation, has pain, they could try THCA and not get high from it. It's really fascinating. Let me take a quick break because I see a couple questions on here. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Let me see if I can get to these on my computer here. Gonna go down to the comments here. Here's a question about marijuana and pregnancy. Now, fascinating discussion, challenging to answer, and I will do a whole live cast on it eventually. But there's mixed results. Basically, a lot of research went into the effect of cannabis on pregnant mothers. And the majority of this research was performed at the peak of the drug war. So this is in the 70s and 80s when they were really trying to reduce illicit drugs in America, and they were doing all the studies they could and funding researchers who could find harms of cannabis. Now, they have since done more studies to compile the data and really take out a lot of, so they would study people in the 70s who smoked cigarettes and marijuana, and they'd say, oh, here's these harms of the baby, but they were not separating out the people who smoke cigarettes. So what they found was, in the latest research, is that there is some possible evidence that taking cannabinoids can affect birth weight. But it's not a dangerous effect. It's not something that is showing that babies are so small that they're premature or something like that. But there's no evidence that it's harming the fetus. There's no evidence that it's damaging the brain of the fetus. And there's no evidence that it's hurting the mother. In fact, there's a really fascinating study that was performed in Jamaica because, it's unethical to force pregnant women to smoke marijuana or consume marijuana to perform this test. But in Jamaica, they were able to study women who use cannabis as part of their daily herbal regimen and their religion, their spiritual practice, if you will. And a researcher went down because she specifically wanted to know what was happening to the babies that were born, to these mothers who were smoking marijuana, large amounts of it every single day. And not only did she not find that the babies were damaged in any way, and they did follow-up studies. They did follow-up study at 1 year, at 5 years. They've really spent a lot of time with the babies. And not only did they not find any evidence of damage, any evidence of slow productivity or any kind of developmental issues in the babies, what they did notice was the opposite. They actually found that the babies of the women, and they had a control group, they had Jamaican mothers who were not consuming cannabis. What they found were the babies whose mothers did use cannabis were actually developing some of the points, the developmental stages. They were hitting those points at a little faster rate. They were a little bit more responsive. They were a little bit more bonded and connected with their mother. So it's a fascinating study because it really debunks all of the pregnancy drug war fears that this is a negative drug to take for mothers. Now, that doesn't mean that I suggest that you're pregnant and great, you can open the floodgates and start using cannabis. I still think that it's important to think about what your symptoms are. So if you have nausea, for example, and then to look at the drug that is prescribed for nausea. What does that drug do to the fetus? What does that drug do to the mother? What are the long-term effects of the pharmaceuticals for that symptom? And then you compare it side by side to the other example, which would be just a few puffs of marijuana when the mother is nauseous during pregnancy. So then with a physician and a qualified medical professional, you can weigh those risks, especially in a state now where you have medical marijuana. Many pregnant women have access to both. They have access to prescription drugs to fight symptoms during pregnancy, and they have access to medical marijuana. My personal belief is that cannabis and cannabinoids, they are non-toxic to the system. If used properly and not abused, they can benefit a lot of the symptoms that mothers experience. But I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving medical advice, so don't take my word on it. Another quick question from someone here. Let me just refresh my screen. It's going to take a minute. I'll just read it off my phone here. Another question here says, what is best to use to treat Lyme disease and seizures? This is a really great question. Lyme disease, very complicated disease with many ailments. I have tons of clients with Lyme disease. I would say that is something you should ask me personally or separately. Go to EzraHelps.com, fill out an intake form. We can talk about Lyme disease and the symptoms. It's very individual and different for everyone. Seizures, if we're talking about seizures, then we would need to use a muscle relaxant, right? That's something to reduce the overfiring of the muscles and the nerves controlling the muscles. And typically people are using CBD for this. CBD, cannabidiol, is readily available. It has been shown to reduce seizures and has famously reduced seizures in children. So if epilepsy or seizure issues are something you or a family member is dealing with, then I would say CBD is a great place to start. All right, let me just reference the CBDA, THCA, the cannabinoids from the raw plant. Just want to sum up by saying this is a great way to deliver cannabinoids to the body, get the benefits of these little good ninjas going around seeking to reduce cancer cells, to bring cells to homeostasis without the psychoactivity, without the high. Unfortunately, CBDA and THCA from the marijuana plant are not legal yet. THCA is a precursor to THC, so it's still a controlled substance, which is unfortunate because a lot of people could benefit from THCA as a non-psychoactive alternative to THC and still have inflammation relief. So this is a ninja. THCA and CBDA are like ninjas hidden in the shadows that so few people know about. The last one I'll talk about is THCV. THCV is tetrahydrocannabidiol, which is something that is, Varin rather, is trendy right now in the research community because what they're finding is THCV is an appetite suppressant. They have given THCV to mice who are obese, and it reduces their food intake. So if we're looking at a culture like America's culture where there's a lot of obesity and a lot of diet trends and a lot of people trying to shed weight and trying to reduce their cravings and their food intake, THCV is this potential goldmine of pharmaceuticals that will help people stop eating. So you can't just go out and smoke pot and think, oh, I'm getting THCV, so I'm gonna not have any munchies. Unfortunately, THC is an appetite stimulant, and there's usually way more THC in a plant than THCV, so it's hard to get the appetite suppressant effects of THCV. Eventually, we will breed plants and create drugs that have THCV, so people can experiment, or they will do trials on whether or not they actually work for drugs, for appetite suppression or not. Let me just check my comments, see if I missed any questions. If I missed questions, feel free to still post them. I will answer them after the live cast. In fact, I will do that because I'm going over my time here. So I'll get to these questions in the comments after the session. And just to sum up, how do we deliver these cannabinoids to our body? The best way is if you live in a state with medical marijuana, you have access to it. Go to your doctor, talk about medical marijuana. Smoking cannabis is one way to deliver cannabinoids to the body, but I'm such a proponent of health that and doing it properly, delivering the right cannabinoid in the right way for the right ailment, that it brings up a much wider array of administration methods. One is topicals. So a daily massage with a THCA or CBDA oil is a great inflammatory, provides great inflammatory potential. Oils in general, when we ingest oils, we can deliver those cannabinoids deeper into tissues because our tissues are also oil-based, they're lipid-based, and those cannabinoids go deep into the cells in that way. The other traditional form is through inhaling them. So I hope you guys learned a little bit about the geeky side of cannabis and cannabinoids and their ninja-like attributes. You can find me on EzraHelps.com. You can look for Ezra Helps on YouTube. You can look for Ezra Helps on Facebook if you're not already here, or if you're looking at this video elsewhere. All my posts get transcribed and turned into blog posts that go on my website. And then my videos also end up on my website and the Ezra Helps YouTube channel as well. Next week, if you're tuning in to my live cast, I'm going to be talking about cannabis and healthy eating during the holidays. So we're getting together with family, lots of eating. How can cannabis actually contribute to healthy eating? That's what I'll be talking about next week. And thanks for joining. I'll get to the questions on the comments. Take care.